Welcome back to another tutorial by Voice First. Today we're going to talk about staging, which we can modify so that way we can deploy to different environments for our Alexa skills in Google Actions. You might be wondering, what could I possibly need staging for in my apps? Well, we asked the Jovo team that. They replied to one of our questions on Twitter, are we using stages? And I said that we weren't yet. At the time we weren't using stages. So what did they think the biggest benefit was? The Jovo team responds, using stages makes it easier to work on projects with multiple team members, as well as separate projects for our dev environments and production. Locally, you'll probably want to use the Jovo Webhook, and in production, you might have Lambda, and you might even have an additional endpoint that you'll want for your development environment for QA testing. So let's get started with adding staging. For one of our applications, voicedrycleaner.com, we have local testing that we use, as well as a development environment which we're not using right now, in a production environment that we do use. I want to encourage our developers to deploy to dev before they deploy to production. So let's work on that by creating a endpoint which will be used locally, a dev environment which will deploy to one Lambda function, and we'll update our Alexa skills to the dev Lambda function, as well as a production endpoint that we can use to deploy our Alexa skills to live. In addition, let's add in Google Action endpoints that are going to be API gateways, so that way we can deploy everything using the Jovo command line interface and not have to worry about interacting with GUIs, or graphic user interfaces. To get started, you can go over to the Jovo Tech website, and all that I did was I searched staging. And when you search staging, there are these staging examples that I used. I'm down in the different endpoints. So for the different endpoints section, this is the default endpoint that will be used if no stage is specified. If a stage is specified, like dev or production, it'll use one of these. It'll use these parameters for your deployment. We'll get started just by adding in. I'm just going to copy and paste this whole thing. Copy stages, and we will paste stages right down here. Let's make sure that our formatting is right. What do we need to do? Tab back. I don't think that was the right move. Maybe it's just this guy. Cool. Looks like everything's in decent alignment now. I'm pretty serious about my tabs. There we go. Cool. So now we have in here, we have this information up top is actually our production info. So I'm going to copy that into our production environment. And then we'll create some new endpoints for our development environment. So let's do that. First things first, I'm going to cut this Alexa information, and I'm going to paste it down into our production environment. There's going to be a lot when I paste this, so don't let it overwhelm you. We have been adding in all of the manifest info, so that way we can update all of our publishing info straight from the command line, which makes it faster for us to publish and deploy our applications. Skill ID for what we want to deploy to is going to stay the same. I think the only difference is going to be endpoint, which we have defined over here, which right now is our Jovo Webhook endpoint. That's not what we want. Let's grab the correct Lambda ARN from our Jovo endpoint. And let's make sure I'm doing this right. So all that we need is an endpoint, and we can include our Lambda dev ARN in there. In this case, our production ARN. We'll go to Lambda. Right now, I believe we're on version 3. We just included the Alexa presentation language, otherwise known as APL. So I can copy that, and now I can paste this endpoint straight into production. Simply place your prod. We'll update these comments so that they still are applicable. Prod Lambda ARN here. Period. Proper English. Okay, we don't need these events anymore. We don't need these. Is events really where the endpoint is? I wonder if that's correct. I think what I want to modify is actually different. Okay, endpoint should just be nested right in the beginning. So what that means is that right after skill ID, we're going to want to define endpoint, and endpoint should have. So I'm actually going to undo that change that I just made. I'm going to leave this as our Jovo Webhook endpoint. Okay, leave that as our Jovo Webhook endpoint, and up here after skill ID, I will define an endpoint. So looking back at the documentation, we have Alexa skill, which is an object, and then one of the attributes of that object is endpoint. So we have Alexa skill, and one of the attributes of that object is called endpoint, and inside of there, I'm going to paste the ARN, the Lambda ARN for production, and I will add a comma so that way we can still do the rest of this info. We have a production Alexa skill with the skill ID. I'll make sure that the skill ID is accurate for our production Alexa skill, which is voicedrycleaner.com. So I'll copy the skill ID, paste it as the skill ID here, bam. I'm going to note, because we do have multiple front-end skills that work with one single back-end function, so I'm going to say this is voicedrycleaner.com skill ID. And this is our production Lambda ARN. Okay, so now we have our Alexa skill defined with the production skill ID as well as the production endpoint. Now down in Google Action, we will need the API gateway for our production endpoint. We can find that by going back to AWS and heading down to API gateway. Now we should have an API gateway for my dry cleaner, or maybe it's voicedrycleaner.com. We have a lot of endpoints in here. I'm actually going to figure out which endpoint is correct by going to Dialogflow to figure out what we're using for our production apps. I do think I know, but I'm still going to check because I committed. Boop, boop. Sign in. Alright, once we're signed in, we have our voicedrycleaner.com, and for fulfillment, we're using our Google Publish. Let's see if that's one of these. Google. Interesting. I'm not seeing it. Google Publish, where are you? Is this it? Stages. Google Publish. This is it. So here is our API gateway endpoint that we want to put in for right here. Alright, so now we have nested, you need one tab. Okay, now for our production environment, we have an Alexa skill and we have a Google action, and the endpoint for our Google action in production is our production API gateway, AWS API gateway, and for our production Alexa skill, we have our Lambda ARN, that is our production endpoint, as well as the production skill. Let's test this real quick by deploying to Lambda and seeing if it updates. Let's verify what the last time was that the Lambda function was updated, so that way we can prove it was updated at the right time. So it was updated 47 minutes ago, probably by one of our automated deployments, and now all that I need to do is run Jovo, clear all this. We'll go Jovo build /stage prod. I believe it's all lowercase. Yeah, prod is lowercase. So we'll build for prod. Okay, and then it created all that, so now we can go Jovo deploy we'll go target Lambda, so that we're only updating our Lambda function, and then we'll go platform, is it platform? Platform Alexa skill. We'll see if that works. /stage prod. So we are targeting the Lambda function, so we only want to deploy to AWS Lambda. We're specifying our Alexa skill so that we're only looking at this Lambda endpoint, and we are going to deploy from the production stage. Alright, we're deploying to stage production. It's zipping up the code, and then it will deploy. We'll know if this worked if this function gets updated at runtime, or when it's all finished. While that's going, right now we don't have a real dev. We do have this test account, so we can actually use this test account as our development environment. So let's do that. Let's get that all set up. So for our dev environment, I'm going to copy the same info that we have for production, and then I'll modify it that way. That way it makes sense with what we've already defined. Paste all that info. We'll collapse the manifest so that looks a little bit cleaner. Again, if you want to put all of your publishing info inside of your project.js, it's faster for you to deploy and publish new versions of your Alexa skills and actions on Google Assistant. For our dev stage, we'll want this other endpoint, which will be test dry cleaner. And we'll paste that here into endpoint. Instead of production, it's going to be dev lambda ARN. Skill ID will still be the same. The only difference is going to be the endpoint that we're deploying to. And for Google, we'll actually define another one. So we'll go back to the correct API gateway. And in here, let's look at stages. And let's see if we can create a new stage. And this will be called dev. QA testing. Okay, don't know what those are. So we'll just, what? I guess we'll pick that. Not sure what, why we need that, but we'll create it. All right, now we have another one, and it's called dev, and this should also trigger our, this should trigger our Lambda function. Not sure if it does. Yeah, it says down here that it will. Settings. How do I know which? Will it tell me which function it's triggering? I'm not sure it's actually triggering the right function, but we can find out. I guess we can just do it. Interesting. So the question that I'm trying to figure out is, maybe I just have to set up an entirely new API gateway that publishes to, because this post, what I want to figure out is where it's deploying to. Like this is going to be reading from the Lambda dry cleaner Google. I will want the dev stage to actually read from a different one. I won't want it to read from our production Lambda. I'll want it to read from our development Lambda. So the question is, how do I get it to read from our development Lambda? Can I add a resource? Create a resource? Doesn't look like what I want. Okay. This is taking a little bit longer than I thought, so what I'm going to do is I'll actually just create a new API. This may be a waste of resources, but this is what we're going to do. Dev dry cleaner Google. Okay, so this is for QA and testing. Create the API, and then we will create a method of post, because that's how Google will send requests to our Lambda function. And once we do that, we want it to hit our Lambda function of, open up another one of these guys, Lambda, and we will want our, where is our test dry cleaner. So we'll copy this name, go back here, use our test dry cleaner. Yes, that is correct. Okay, so now this Lambda is, this will trigger, this API gateway endpoint will trigger our Lambda function over there. So then we'll deploy the API. Not entirely sure what these stages are. This is very confusing. I really don't like AWS services, to be honest, even though I worked there. So the stage name will be dev. That's really the only stage that we need. QA and testing. and we'll deploy. Once we deploy, we'll get this new URL that we can copy and throw in for Google. Bam. Okay. What else do we need from this tutorial? So we have an endpoint. The only thing I'm not seeing is some way to specify our Google account that we want to deploy this to and the actual ID of the skill. Let's check back in over on our AWS Lambda and see if the function was updated. We can see voice dry cleaner was updated 3 minutes ago, which makes me think that this deployment was successful. Now let's see if I can deploy to dev. Oh, I didn't build. Stop. Jovo build -- stage dev. Build for our dev stage first. And once we built for our dev stage, then we will deploy to our dev stage. Still only the Lambda from Alexa skill. So this one should update test dry cleaner. I'm curious what updated that test dry cleaner, if it was me creating this new API gateway, or if, oh yeah, it had to have been, because if we go into this test dry cleaner, we can see that we now have an API gateway that's attached. I guess a second API gateway. This is what I just created, this dev. So that was why it was updated a minute ago. It should be now 2 minutes ago, and once this is done, it should go back down to 1 minute ago. After this, what else will we need to know? So other things that you can do in here, if you have different publishing info, like for us, maybe we only want to include the basic info for our dev branch, but for production, we really want to include all the manifest info, including publishing info and targeting info. That way we can just use the command line for deployment as well as for publishing the app. So you can specify different things inside of each of your stages that make it more robust for your publishing. And the best part is, unlike if you just wanted to modify the endpoint to your Lambda ARN, if you're like, okay, Pat, I just leave my Lambda ARN into the endpoint and I don't use stages at all. Well, if you do that, Jovo runs weird. So over here, when we go Jovo run, right now it's going to be like, yes, great, awesome. This is your webhook. Now, if we paste in our endpoint of our Lambda function, and then we try to run it again, now it should give us an error. It should say, hey, you're trying to use Lambda, it's not supported. So, but then it'll figure it out and go back to Jovo Webhook. Still, you want to avoid warnings at all costs, and the use of stages helps so that locally it'll default to this endpoint. Also, Google action is defined everywhere, so we can also delete our Google action from here. But it looks like natural language understanding is not defined in these. Oh, it is. Interesting. So we'll define it right here. Dialog flow. Dialog flow. I'm not sure if this is necessary, but it's not included, so I'm going to include it. And now I can delete this here because it's defined everywhere that we need it to. We should be done deploying. Yeah, we're done deploying. Let's see what our time is. So the time is now up to 4 minutes. Let's see if it's reduced on refresh. Reduced down to 9 seconds ago. So we were successfully able to update only this one and we didn't update our production version of the app. This is great. Now let's see if we can update it all together. So it looks like, shoot. We're in review for this one right now, so I don't necessarily want to override this, but I don't think we have a test cleaner anywhere, so we'll create a test cleaner with a different skill endpoint. Dev cleaner. So this dev cleaner will be custom, and we'll create this skill. And with this skill created, will be delivered a skill ID. So let's take this and we'll throw it inside. So this is a perfect example. I want to test the changes, but both our production version and our dev version are both uneditable right now because it's in review. Watch what happens if we try to update the skill that's production. Okay, so we don't want to target Lambda this time. We want to just target the platform of Alexa skill. We're going, well, you know what? We will target _model. So this should update our language model once we deploy this. And it should give us an error because _model platform Alexa skill stage JK, we want prod. What is the option? Unavailable model. Okay. It says model is an option, but invalid option model up here. Interesting. Target _model. Oh, I defined this incorrectly. It is _target model. Alright, so now we should update it, but I think, yeah, it can't because the skill is in certification. So we can't update the skill unless we created this new skill like what we just did. So again, we'll copy this skill ID. We will paste it into the dev section for the skill ID. And now, if we deployed a dev for our Alexa skill, we should have a unique skill ID as well as a unique endpoint that's generated, in addition to our unique manifest that is generated for it all. Now, truly, I do not care about the manifest because this is just our test. Well, actually I do, because this does include some of our interfaces like Alexa presentation language. It includes our permissions for notifications. It includes these subscriptions to events. Now, these event subscriptions do not matter because we're not going to be sending out subscriptions for our development environment. So I'll go ahead and delete that, keep our code as small as possible. Let's see if we can deploy this to dev. First thing we'll want to do is we'll want to go Jovo build _stage dev, and after it's done building, we will deploy to stage dev. Deploy the model. We don't need to specify a model. We can just deploy everything on the platform, but instead of the stage prod, we will deploy to the stage dev. All right, so the first thing it's going to do is it's going to run all these commands and it's going to start to zip it all together before it deploys to our dev stage. Let's check back here. It looks like the last day it was modified was there, but we do not have any language model or any interfaces defined. Inside of the skill, we only have these 5 built-in intents with nothing else. And for our interfaces, we do not have APL selected, and I don't know if we've at this skill level, okay, we haven't added can fulfill intent request in yet, but it does work on some of our branches. So it looks like we have successfully deployed the Alexa skill. It's updating the Alexa skill with this skill ID. With an invocation name, it added actually the wrong invocation name. And it added an endpoint. I wonder if I can update the invocation name inside of our project.js too. That way, if we could define an invocation name in here as well, then we are less dependent on this. Because right now, as far as I'm aware, the only place invocation name is defined is inside of English US JSON. And I would prefer to not have to update 2 files. The less files I have to modify to change my deployments, the better. All right, we're still deploying. It looks like the entire skill is deployed, so now it is just updating our Lambda function. We'll find out by we'll back out of here and go back in just to give it a chance to refresh. Okay. Did it just change the name? Okay, yeah, it just changed the name. It changed it from dev app to voicedrycleaner.com, which is good. I wonder where that's defined. That might be defined in our config file. We'll find out. Config. Oh, that's app. Config. Where is app name? Where is app name defined? If I was an app name and I was hiding from Patrick, where would I be? It's probably here somewhere. I'll worry about that later. Not super important right now. But we can see that it added in all of our intents. We now have 18 intents versus the 5 that we had before. And for our interfaces, we have the Alexa presentation language selected. Additionally, I believe down in permissions, we should have notifications turned on, unless that's not revealed in here. Yeah, it's not revealed in here. They don't, well, what is reminders? Oh yeah, I removed the reminders. That's right. My bad. Is it all done deploying? Okay, it's still updating Lambda, still uploading to Lambda, but once it's done uploading to Lambda, we should be able to see that this test dry cleaner will be updated to the new version. The only other thing that I haven't verified is that it's able to update our Dialogflow agent with the publishing info. So once we've verified that all of our dev info is correct, the deployment's updated. Let's refresh. We'll go over to Google Assistant. Cool. Test dry cleaner was updated 15 seconds ago, and the Lambda ARN that we have over here should be for our test endpoint. Let's find out. Go down to endpoint. We have HTTPS defined with this Jovo Webhook, so that's not correct. I wonder why it threw our Jovo Webhook in there as the endpoint. Because right here in our dev for Alexa skill, it looks like we do have this endpoint defined for our test dry cleaner. So why didn't it give us the correct endpoint? Oh, it's probably in manifest. Manifest. Down here in endpoint, it's defined as our Jovo Webhook, which is not what we want. So let's expand this manifest. Where does it go? It goes right after subscription in events. So we'll want to copy all of these events. That might not be correct. Let me Google this real quick. Alexa skill manifest. All right, so we'll go inside of the manifest to see where it's defined for, I want to find endpoint. Yeah, endpoint. Let's see if they give us an example of the overall manifest down here at the bottom. Cool, so we've got APIs, custom, endpoint. Okay, so inside of APIs, I believe that's where it'll need to be. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so for our APIs, inside of the APIs, I think it's inside of custom. It's also inside of custom. We will want endpoint to be defined without these guys. Get all that in line. Get that guy in line. Cool. Cool. So now we have a Lambda. What is URI? URI is the same as our ARN. So let's copy this endpoint. Boop. Boop. I hope this is dev. Dang it. I just put all that in for prod. Well, that saves us having to do it a second time. Looking on the bright side. Inside of custom, paste that there. Again, our tabs are off with this. Cool. And now we can copy this endpoint, which is our dev environment. Put that over here for what we want. And now we don't need to wait. That was a long time that we had to wait for that deploy. So this time I'm going to specify a target. Target. And this time we only want to do info, which will only update the manifest. All right, so this time should do less work, so it should be faster. And the only thing that we're modifying is the model. When we specify the model, that is going to specifically update the endpoint, your interfaces, as well as any of your distribution data. So it'll update, we've updated our name, we've updated short sample description, sample full description. Uh-oh, I forgot to build. My bad. We'll see if it updated without a build, but I think we will need to run the build, so we'll do that real quick while we're waiting. Build stage dev. Go down to endpoint. And we still have this Jovo Webhook endpoint, so yeah, I did need to build, so we'll deploy again. What that build does, let me explain a little bit. When we run the build, it takes all of the info inside of our project.js, and then it builds out this platforms folder. So you can see the skill.json is actually what gets deployed, and inside of here is where everything is defined, like the name of our application, the sample full description, which is what was pasted inside of the certification tab, sample short description, you can update the category, etc. And where is endpoint events? Endpoint. Here it is. Endpoint is now, after we built, test dry cleaner. Once it's done, it should be done by now. Whoa. The trigger setting for Lambda is invalid. Let's think about this. The trigger setting for the Lambda is invalid. I believe this means that we haven't added the skill ID to the Lambda endpoint. So we'll copy this, And then we'll go back to our Lambda function for test dry cleaner. And we'll see which Alexa skills we have defined. I'll actually just add an Alexa skill with this. I want this. Add. Save. All right, let's try it again. Hopefully it works this time. Because you have to add it as an approved endpoint. If it's not approved, it will give an error over here saying, hey, you haven't, the Lambda function does not, the Lambda function you have to specify where it should be able to accept requests from. So we've defined this API gateway as a safe sender and these 3 Alexa skills as safe senders. So we should be good now. Cool, the deployment was completed. It was that issue. So now let's go back over here. Let's refresh the page. Yeah, that's fine. And this time we have this new Lambda ARN. We're no longer using HTTPS, so it all worked. The last thing I want to check is that Dialogflow gets updated based off of the environment that we choose. Let's go back and see the examples of what I'm talking about. So in our project.js, we'll collapse this Alexa skill now that we're dealing with Dialogflow. For Dialogflow, we have an endpoint of dev for here, and for our production environment, we have this Google Publish. So let's first check out this dev one, and then we'll check out the production environment. We want to remember to build this time with stage dev. Bam, and now we want to deploy, and instead of Alexa skill, I believe it's Google Action. We'll find out. And we want to remove, I guess we'll remove it all. Let's see what happens. I don't think I've ever deployed a Google Action from the command line before. So let's see if it works. It might not work, because we never specified any sort of app ID or a project ID. So I'm curious where it's getting that info from. Let's see if I can find out inside of the platforms folder. Not Alexa skill, Google Action. Okay, so there's your Dialogflow agent, agent.json. So we've got this URL, cool. But where does it define the actual Dialogflow agent that we want to? Looks like created the file. I don't know which action it updated. Let's see if it updated the action. I think it should have updated. It has not updated this one. What did it update? How do we know what it updated? When you have questions, let's turn to the documentation. So let's go to deploy. And let's figure out where I want to deploy to Google Assistant. So deploy to Google Assistant to a Dialogflow agent, you can either import the Dialogflow agent.zip into your Dialogflow agent. We recommend using the restore option. If you're using the V2, you can also deploy directly to the platform. Okay, I guess they have a deployment tutorial, so let's follow that. Introduction. Set up a skill. Great. Use created with Jovo deploy to restore. Yes. Finally, you can use the command line to update your agent. Okay. Updating the dialog version 2 API. Got it. Yes, we are already on version 2. Set up after you've saved the changes, you'll find service account right beneath with the project ID. Creating a new service account. Okay, so we might have to create a new service account, but I'm really just curious where. Last but not least, move the key file to our project's root folder. Okay, so it looks like we will need to move that to our root folder. Aha. Okay, so there is a project ID that we can define and that we need to define, as well as a key file. So those are the two things that we're missing that we will need to get in order to deploy to Dialogflow using the command line interface. A little bit more work to deploy to Google Actions, but it's kind of a set it and forget it kind of thing. Once we set it up the first time, it does take a little bit of time, but once we do set it, we don't have to worry about it again, and it becomes easier to publish because we can just use the command line to deploy to Lambda, Google Action, Alexa skill, all at the same time, all using the environment variables that we want to use. Okay, start with dev. Dev for Dialogflow has a project ID, a key file, and an endpoint. Project ID, we'll get that from Dialogflow. From here in settings, where is project ID? Project ID, project ID. Project ID, cool. Project ID. Cool, and now we want a code which we can find out how to make in this tutorial. Okay. Lead us, what do we want to do? After saving changes, you'll find a service account right beneath the project ID. It will lead us to Google Cloud Platform. What will lead us to Google Cloud Platform? Aha, Google Cloud, great. Great, okay. So once we're in there, what do we want to do? We want to create a new service account using the button at the top of the page. There's no button at the top of the page. What page are we on? Service accounts in I am an admin. So we want to go to I am an admin, and then we want service accounts, and we want to make sure we are still in versestrikecleaner.com. Now that we're here, we want to create a new service account. So create a service account. Okay, and then so we select Dialogflow API admin as the role. Where do I select that? The account name is going to be development. And this is going to be Jovo Dialogflow key for dev environment. We'll create, and then we need to give it access. Can we go Dialogflow? Dialogflow API admin. I believe that's what it said. Dialogflow API admin, great. After that, we create a new JSON key. Looks like we leave everything default. We want to make sure JSON is selected. There's no option for me to select JSON, so we just want to click the create key button. Ah, there it is, JSON. Create this key, and now we have the key. Great. And now we're done. So with this, let's view it in the folder, show it in our folder. I'm going to rename this to Dialogflow dev Dialogflow service account key dash dev. And I will open up, I want this to go inside of our app folder. That way when we deploy, inside of our SRC source folder, that way when we run Jovo build, it will include the service account key that we have just created. So we'll take this dev file, throw it in there. Cool. Let's now specify this path to key file. So currently we are in project.js, so at the same level we'll want to go inside of SRC, and inside of SRC, let me refresh, we will want to grab Dialogflow service account key, Dialogflow service account key, I believe it's -dev, all caps, yes, .json. Cool. Okay. VoiceStrike, we have a project ID, we have an endpoint, and this endpoint is for dev. Let's run it and see if it works. I didn't read all the way through the tutorial. What did you say? Uploading to Lambda. What is the error? The security token included in the request is invalid. Is that helpful? I'm not sure that's helpful. We'll just try it again. Uh-oh, I didn't build. Always build, just in case. We built for dev, let's deploy for dev. And let's hope that this time our Dialogflow agent fulfillment endpoint gets updated to, this should change to /dev. What else do we need to talk about? We could talk about while we're waiting for this to deploy. We'll go back to project.js and see if there's anything. Well, I guess we'll keep reading through this tutorial to see if there's, I bet there's something I missed. Activate, deploy, Google action, --deploy. I wonder if we could just do that. If we can build and deploy using just one command. Okay, so this time we are not, we got more info. We got uploading and restoring agent for voice-cleaner.com. So it did get the right name. Let's see if it updated. Hey, yes, so we now have this dev version, which is amazing. Now I am modifying one of our production apps, so I do want to make sure that I'm not screwing up some of our publishing info. And it's also uploading to Lambda. We can fix any issues that I'm introducing. Do I need to create a new one? I don't think I need to for production, because it's the same app for now. In a bit, we will create a new, not in this video, but I will behind the scenes create a new project with a different service account key, so that way we aren't modifying our production apps when we deploy it to dev. That way we're only updating what we want to update. Difference is, so right now the only difference when we deploy for Google Action is going to be the endpoint. It's either, so the backend fulfillment endpoint is going to switch from dev to Google Publish, which means that our Google Assistant, the action on Google, is going to send its request to this API endpoint when we deploy to dev, and it will send requests to this API gateway endpoint when we deploy to production. We can use the same key. Womp womp. Okay, so it's still giving us an error about deploying to Lambda, but really I don't care about that right now. Let's try that deploy command that they gave us. So this should deploy to Google Action, and it should deploy, and we should go, I think that's it. We just want to, oh yeah, --stage. We want to go stage prod. Ooh, that's cool. So now we have both built for our production stage, and we are also deploying. That is nice. That way we can just run one command and both build and update, because as we already saw earlier in this video, I forgot to run the build command, and if you forget to run build, you're not going to get the updated version of the app like you want to have. I'm going to be sure to copy this and send it to my team so that they're aware of what we can use. Slack. Use Slack to communicate. I have too many tabs open. Go down to Samir and send this real quick so that he can get it. Where's Samia? Bam. Get out of there. Samir's got some notes for me that I'll look at after this video. Samir's our lead dev, and I love that man with a passion. He is so incredibly smart. Okay, so we're building. Wow, lots of builds. What is all this? This is lots of noise. Did we deploy yet? Okay, so we've updated to voice-cleaner.com, so now we should have the proper endpoint. Instead of dev, we should have Google Prod or Google Action. Google Publish. Great. So now we have the correct actions. We have updated entities with everything that we could possibly need. The only thing that I haven't gotten to work yet is, well, that I haven't tested. This is a thought for next time, is that we can update the action on Google Assistant. Why would we want to update the actions on Google? Oh, I would want to actually update all the publishing info for this action on Google. So my question, posing a question at the end of this video, we have successfully completed deployments for staging environments. We have a dev environment, we have a production environment, and we also have our local environment. Next question that I want to pose is, how can we extend upon this to deploy all of the publishing info to our actions on Google account? We figured out how to update our dialog flow, but how can we use stages to update the publishing info for actions on Google? Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, please ask them down in the comments below. Otherwise, I will catch you next time teaching you more about how to build voice apps using the Jovo framework.